So today I'm going to be joining Steve Smith, who's the president of Lake Forest Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to be joining their Facebook live stream. So stick with me throughout the interview and feel free to leave any comments or questions that you might have. And hope you're on the live stream.
Hey, good morning, Jim.
Hey, Steve, how are you?
Doing great, man. Welcome to Lake Forest Live. Thanks for being on with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, I kind of teed up the program in terms of what we were going to be talking about today, and certainly a little bit about your background. But why don't you tell us how did you get into this? I mean, this is not your run-of-the-mill occupation. I think it's highly interesting. So what prompted you to make your way in the whole investigative field?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I jokingly tell people that all you need to do is have a leather jacket, a sports car, and a pair of binoculars or a camera, and you're into the business. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. So my background is going back, it's a family-owned business. My dad started it up in 1975. I had never had any intention of actually working in the business. Right around the time that I was getting out of college, my dad had acquired an investigation company that specializes in intellectual property brand protection services. It was called National Trademark Investigations. This is a little bit more exciting, a little bit sexier, involved brands and big law firms and raids and seizures and counterfeiting and things like that. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I'll work in the business while I'm finishing up school, make some money, and see if I like it. I always knew that I wanted to be in business and kind of have a passion for technology and business and automation software and things like that. So I thought, hey, how can I bring those skills to this business to try and improve it? In the process, I obviously had to learn the business, become licensed, and learn all those different things. And so over time, I realized I was in this for the long haul, and I realized that I need to be familiar with continuing education type of things that lawyers do, and civil code of procedure and evidence handling and everything that governs litigation on the civil side I needed to be familiar with. So that's where I spent my time training, learning, and educating myself on that. And then as time went on, simplifying the business processes, looking at sales and marketing and finance, and really focusing on running the business as opposed to working in it, where I did for numerous years, now working on it and adding on different things to the business that I'm sure we'll get into.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed in the information you sent me that you've got what appears to be other sites that are devoted to various subsets of what you provide. So to me, when you're starting to branch out in that regard, I mean, you've definitely figured out how to reach out to people for the very specific services you offer. So that's a great look.
Thank you.
Let's start with this, because one of the things I run into when I'm meeting with business owners or I'm talking with people in other related fields like human resources or attorneys that deal with business litigation, half the time businesses are out there totally exposed. They don't even realize it. So from your vantage point, what are some of the big ones that employers or owners need to understand, be aware of, even if they haven't yet taken any action? What do they need to be looking for out there?
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve. And a lot of times businesses sometimes they're just operating not aware of those risks and potential pitfalls. Other times they're aware, but they're kind of rolling the dice. So obviously in California, especially, it's a very litigious state. There's a lot of reasons why employers can get sued. So, I'm kind of passionate about helping clients contain those risks the best they can. So if you look at the life cycle of a business, I always like to look at what type of people, what type of other businesses are contacting the clients, the operation, the infrastructure, the virtual infrastructure of the business. And so I think that right now, a hot topic is cyber, right? Cybersecurity. And I think that that's a big misnomer. Cybersecurity involves IT planning and software and technology. It also involves training your people, having an IT provider that's automating and doing a lot of things in the background, and also having cyber insurance policy to actually, a comprehensive one that actually is going to deal with the business interruption and the costs associated with those types of things. I think that's a big thing that businesses are becoming more and more aware of. Unfortunately, it usually comes after they've been threatened, in terms of some criminal has tried to take their data and they want a fee for it, right? That's a big one, and I think that, yeah.
I've only got kind of a limited understanding of those, but the ones that I've read about, it seems like the only mitigating solution is for the company, if they have the insurance, to make a claim for the value of what was lost or taken. Because you don't know where these folks are, and it's very difficult to figure out who they are and where they are.
Yeah, it's very difficult. The idea of identifying who they are and where they are is almost impossible from an investigative standpoint. And what's funny is that it's not funny, but if you look at the dark web, these criminals are offering, these services for hire, and they offer like money back guarantees and ultimate service. And like you read about this stuff, and they're very sophisticated. So really it comes down to preparation and being prepared to deal with what comes and having the proper insurance that does give you the coverage. So if you do have to pay a ransom or whatever, that you have coverage for that. But some people don't even realize like the business interruption and losses for some businesses, even small businesses. If you think about no access to your data and your virtual and your IT infrastructure for 1, 2, 3, 4 days, if you're a law firm, that's no billing. There's mass transit people, it was millions and millions of dollars. They couldn't accept payments in the Bay Area. So again, it impacts businesses all differently, but it impacts your brand, it's your reputation, your bottom line. And then if you don't have insurance, it's out of pocket cost.
Wow. All right, so cybersecurity is a big one. That just continues to get more play in the media, especially when somebody gets hacked or their whole system gets taken down. From more of a small business local standpoint, what are the kind of things that you typically get called in for, or if you're working with a company, kind of alert them about that there's potential exposure to?
Yeah, it's a good point. So I think that the typical thing is whether you're a small, medium, or enterprise business, that's employees behaving badly. When employees do bad things, that's usually when we get called. Hey, we think that an employee stole something. We believe, and when I say employees, I think that we need to look at both W-2 type of employees as well as contractors, consultants that are actually, because a lot of companies rely on outside people. So you got to look at containing the risk with regard to both kind of segments when you're working with them. So internal theft, external theft that's corroborated or assisted by internal folks is a big one. The other thing that I think culturally businesses of all sizes, even especially small businesses, do not want to put up with employees who are potentially submitting false claims for disability, workers' comp, or any kind of accident-related situation that's gone on. They get really fed up. Employers are like, hey, I heard from a former employee that the guy's working elsewhere, or he's playing soccer on the weekends, or this is all frivolous. And that's because it really impacts their mod rate, their insurance, the risk factors, and the cost of those claims going on for a long period of time is significant. And the concern is that other employees will find out about it and find out that employer is easy pickings, that they can do the same thing and replicate that. So that's a couple examples I think of typical situations where when employees behave badly, a business would reach out to someone like us.
And I think in California, with all of the employment laws and the favorability towards protecting the employee, that just seems like a massive hole for most businesses that have, an employment base, 25 or more, there's enough in there that they have to worry about. So in that particular area, whether it's employees, clients, suppliers, what are some cost-effective things that companies can do initially, well before you get brought in, which I assume is when things get really nasty? What can they do early on to just kind of protect themselves, from inviting that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. So at a basic level, a kind of a pre-employment background check is a pretty low-cost business insurance tool that they can utilize. You figure anywhere from $35 to $50 per applicant to run a background check, just to make sure that you're not hiring a criminal and you're just creating another layer of defense for your company. The same type of thing can be done when you're bringing on a vendor or a partner or a consultant. The same type of background check can be done. And another thing that I think that people often overlook is that when you're working with a subcontractor, a consultant, verify who they are, verify where they are, verify that they have a license if they say they do, which are very basic things. Verify that they have insurance, right? So that, are they a legitimate business? So that if something does go wrong, are you the last line of defense, or are they going to be liable and culpable in that arena? And if you're working with other companies, really important to look at litigation history of the company, right? So you hire an employee, you want to look at criminal things, you want to make sure they have a driver's license, you want to make sure that the prior employment verifies. But if you're working with a company that's maybe supplying you a product or a service that you can't live without, you want to make sure that their brand isn't tarnished and they're not in the midst of litigation that's going to put them out of business or jeopardize their ability to actually fund their operation and deliver a product. And we see that now, right? Supply chain disruption is critical. So, those are a couple things that I think that are pretty easy, pretty cost effective to do when they're done on the front end.
Okay, so if I understand, there's actually a way that you can do a background on a supplier you're currently working with to figure out if they're currently enjoined in some kind of lawsuit or they've got some other kind of financial issue that caused them to cease operations. That's actually possible for businesses to get information on?
Correct, yes. And it's actually easier than doing it on an applicant because you don't have to get authorization or permission. You can do it discreetly without their knowledge if you would like to, if there's a concern. Sometimes we recommend to clients that up front, let them know that you're going to go through this process so they understand that you're diligent in your in your decisions and you're going to look into these things, but it's not required. So it's very, very simple, very, very pretty quick, figure a week or less, usually, a couple days, and very low cost.
Now, if you're doing some pre-employment screening on a potential employee or, whatever that happens to have. In fact, I had a conversation with a business owner this week, and I couldn't answer the question because it's not my area of expertise, but he was asking me, can we go on their social media and kind of check them out and see whether they're solid individuals or not? And I said, I don't know. I said, but I'm talking to a guy on Wednesday who may be able to answer that question. So is social media a viable place, or is that kind of an off-limits place?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's an evolving topic, right? We have so much of our employees or people's lives are documented on social media. And so it's becoming more and more of a thing that's going on. And let's be honest, most employers are doing it lawfully or unlawfully through their own channels and not necessarily reporting it. But currently there's some really great technology out there that allows kind of a compliant social media check done through a provider that protects the employer from seeing things they shouldn't see, like age, gender, race, religion, things like that. And it's focused on things that are of concern, violence, images that depict things that may not be culturally acceptable. There's certain areas that are defined, and the most important part of doing it through a provider is a verification of information. So for instance, Steve Smith, you have a very common name. There could be somebody out there with a social media profile named Steve Smith that's not you, that's done really bad things. So you want to make sure that it's legitimately the right person. So there are some channels. The rule of thumb there is that you're not going to you can't ask for passwords to private accounts on Instagram or Facebook or whatever else. You're trying to verify through 3 points that it's actually the person through, name, prior employer, school, something else that ties the profile to you, and that you're providing back information more in a more filtered manner than what you would get by doing your own search through, a social media platform directly.
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about one of the other areas I maybe get involved in, which is dealing with intellectual property, which it could be the brand that the company is feeling is being tarnished by something. It could be their market reputation that they feel is under assault. Tell us a little bit about that area and what you typically find people get in trouble with, and what you typically do to help them with that. Sure.
Yeah, so when it comes to people's brands or trademarks or IP portfolios, I think that businesses don't always think about the value of it. It's the first, it's one of the key things that a business evaluator will look at. What protects you from other people that may want to offer a service or product that's similar. So I generally, by using a mark or a name in commerce, you establish rights. However, that doesn't mean that you definitely have, the ability to file for a trademark. So I think that what's really important is if clients, what we typically see is that startups and businesses that become popular and very successful very quickly get exploited, right? Everyone wants to utilize and ride the tails of the latest trend, the latest product, the latest service. So what my recommendation is to clients is that even though you don't think you're a large brand or you have a portfolio of IP, that you start establishing a plan to develop value and make sure that when you come to market, you don't necessarily need to register for a trademark. You don't need to go to an attorney, but you need to do search and research to get guidance to make sure that product that you're bringing to market does not bear a mark or a name that's being used by Coca-Cola or Unilever or Google, and you're not aware of it. And now you've created all this brand awareness, and they're going to come at you and say, stop. And now you've got to rebrand, recreate, start from scratch. Or worse, it becomes popular, you don't have the rights, and now everyone's infringing your rights, and you have no ability to go after them. Well, you do have ability under common law to go after them, but it limits your legal fees and things like that, and you can't stop things at the border with regard to ICE and things like that. So it's very inexpensive to get trademark protection if you're actually using a product or a service in commerce. and get that cleared up right away, it immediately gives you protection. It increases the value of your brand and your business. And if in fact somebody does go out there and start using it, it gives you a remedy to enforce. An example comes to mind. We had a service, architectural service company that was growing and sizable, and they were not doing anything in terms of trademark protection, brand protection, trademark filings. And they had people calling them saying, hey, I was just calling because I got a call from someone out of your Colorado office who blah, blah, blah. And they're like, Colorado office? We don't have an office in Colorado. It was actually an ex-employee who set up shop there and was using their name and representing that he was working for them, right? So it's little simple things like that it may not be a huge issue, but it could impact the brand. It could impact, deals, and it could, it's difficult to overcome sometimes to explain why it is that you have a rogue employee using your company name in a market that you don't even have an office in.
Now, what about, do you ever run into situations, because I know this goes on all the time, especially with this country's reliance on manufacturing overseas. Have you ever worked with companies who have discovered that their supplier in a foreign country has given their ingredients or their design over to a third party who is now producing a counterfeit version of their product, and it's leaked back here?
Yeah, unfortunately, our country is a situation where cost and effectiveness to getting to market quickly is important. So a lot of times they'll outsource to other countries, more specifically China, right? So they give product specs and information to them. They'll source it, and they try and come back with a low unit cost so they can actually make money. And unfortunately, this goes back to the trademark protection. So if you have a trademark in the US, it doesn't mean you have a trademark in China. You give your recipe, your ingredients, your molds, your secret sauce to someone over there. They recognize the fact that you have no trademark protection. They will actually go out and file a trademark for that product. Okay, so California is a 7-year convictions only state. So as a background screening company, we can report back cases where there's a charge with a conviction going back 7 years. Okay, that's the first step. Then from there, there's something that California adopted called ban the box, which stemmed from the initial part, which